So today we're excited to talk to you about dbt. It's more than it's a standalone sort of CLI tool that helps with documentation. But I put a little asterisk here because it might do more than that at some point. So I wanted to start with a few disclaimers. This is a really alpha product. It's so hot off the GitHub press that I pushed the release a few hours ago, and I still noticed a little bug, so there we go. But we've done some testing for a little while, and so I think it's playable with. Just one thing that I wanted to make sure that this project is not associated with TripActions. It's something that Virginia and I maintain. If there are problems, don't go and complain to TripActions. They're not responsible for it, and so we take the blame. However, if some of you listened to the coalesce talk that we did, and I have the cap to prove it, we talked about a tool that we developed internally that was to solve some of the similar problems that we're solving in that tool. So the idea kind of stemmed there, but we decided to maintain this separately. So that's pretty much what it is. The disclaimers. We'll start with this statement that we all love documentation, right? That's what we say. However, the reality is that documentation is often forgotten. We often don't have the time to write it. We'll make things consistent later, is what we say. And I'm just adding a small thing. I don't necessarily need to document it now. So this is just a one-off kind of thing. That's the reality. And like Harold, we're hiding the pain a little bit, right? We say we love documentation and really care about it, but underneath we know. So the dream obviously should be something like, I love writing documentation. My documentation is always consistent and up to date, and documentation and testing are prime candidates in my workflow. So that's the dream. Let Virginia talk to us about why we built this little package and what it does.
Hi, I'm Virginia. I'm a data engineer in TripActions, and I'm gonna tell you a little bit how this idea came and why dbt-sugar is now alive. We had in TripActions, we used to use we had a lot of models, a great data team, but we were not very secure about all the definitions and all the testing across our whole amount of models. So we built dbt-sugar, but for TripActions. And why we build it? Well, we built a CLI tool that helps the users enforce the documentation and the testings in all the dbt models. We wanted to enforce the consistent across all the dbt models and the testing coverage. This is a joke from Bastien that is for Jeremy, that we wanted to make the documentation the entitatis principales. Did I say it correctly, Bastien? I hope yes. I really think that when we build this mostly for being able to say that we really can trust our data, that everything is in place, that we know if a column has certain tests, that the test pass, and that if it has certain name, it means really something. So let's go to the next slide. So what happened when we start using it? In TripActions, as I have said, we have a similar tool. Before we start using this tool, the 70% of the models were failing in integrity, in unique, not null, because we didn't have any way to really check in an easy way. We also have the trouble of inconsistent names. So we were having names like INCUID that it was used in different contexts. So with a same name with different descriptions. And that in that columns, names, and descriptions were later shared in the graphs and Tableau and everything that we were building. So even the people in the team, in the data team, were a little, is this the name that it has to be? Is this the description? That was a little bit like a frustration of this should have a different name, but they were not really sure. We didn't want to slow the development. We wanted to be sure that what we were doing was built in a nice way. We really wanted to be sure that if a column was a primary key, it has to be a unique and not null. We wanted to be sure if a column name is INCUID, it has to be INCUID. It doesn't have to be INCUID per month or anything more specific. We want to make PRs that we were confident that the new data and the new columns, the new tests were really working and they were really going to make our business better. Because for the data team, it's not only the data for us, we are sharing the data with all the company. We build our dashboards, we take even the descriptions from dbt and we publish them in data tableau. So in Tableau, sorry. So it's really important that we don't have anything broken, that we are confident about the data that we have, the definitions and the test. So that leads us that now we have less broken stuff. Harold is happy. We are more confident when we publish new data. We are super confident when we have a column name, because when we change a column name, it's spread all around the dbt projects. So we have everything in the same place. Now I let it to Bastien so you can see what I'm talking about.
All right, so I'm going to switch to my terminal and show a little bit how it works. The idea was to build like a tool that would guide you, as we said, right through the documentation. We talked a lot about documentation, but we also slotted in a quick little task that gives you a sort of summary of the test coverage or documentation coverage of your model. So we'll start with this, because then whenever I go through a little bit of documentation, it'll be really nice to see the change. So if I do dbt-sugar, and I type the audit, okay, I have to point it to a certain config, which we can talk about later. I'm going to use the Jaffle shop, the dbt model, and enter. And here I should get a little summary of what's the state of my documentation on the model. So it'll tell me the models and how much documented these columns are. So some of the models, like, for example, fact orders, I've intentionally left out some columns from being documented. And we also have a very basic like test coverage summary of do the columns at least have one test? And that's something that can be defined and be more refined, but that's a high level thing. So that's good. What we can do is tackle our fact orders model. And so instead of audit, I'm going to call doc, because I'm documenting, and I'm going to point it to this model, which is fact orders. I'm getting used to a new keyboard, so this is funny. Anyway, so we start with, like the first prompt question, which is the model already exists, and we are going to be updating the documentation of the model. And so I'm going to write something really quickly, but this model contains all the orders on forum, something like that. That's good enough for now. I'm sure Claire's definition was a lot better than mine, but we'll go over that now. So if I hit enter, now I have a flow that's going to walk me through the columns that are documented versus undocumented. So it tells me that there are 6 columns to document, so columns that do not have a definition yet. When you get a big model, we will show them to you 5 at a time, so it's not like too overwhelming. So we tell you that. The question is, do you want to document all of the first 5 undocumented columns? I'm not going to do all of them because it might get a little bit repetitive. So I'm going to say no, but I said yes. Then basically I would get walked through all of the columns that don't currently have a definition. So I'm going to say no because I want to choose a few columns. So I'll, for example, here I have sort of these columns that are not documented. I'm going to pick the amount column because I don't want to go through too many of them, but I could pick any number of columns if I wanted. So we'll do amount. And then if I hit enter, I am now documented the amount column. So I can write the AUD, because I think that's what was amount. I don't know, pride, the order. This is a bad definition, by the way, but we'll go with that for now. So I'm entering my definition, and this is all cool. And of course, we need to think about tests. So it's going to ask me if I want to add any tests. So at the minute, of course, I want to add tests. At the minute, because it's still pretty alpha, we like support only the unique and not null test because we have written them ourselves. But we have a PR that's sitting in review that's going to use the dbt internals to run the tests so that in theory you can refer to any of your tests, be it the complex ones with arguments or the ones that you have in macros and stuff that are not part of dbt. Also, we don't want to have to rewrite the model code because that doesn't seem like a great idea. So we'll pretend that we are fine with this. Obviously, unique would fail because it's unlikely that, well, it can happen that an order has the same price. So we'll go and select the not null. All orders should have at least something in there. Actually, I'm just going to add the unique just for show because I know it should fail unless there is a unique number of order values in the seed, but we'll see. If not, I have another one to show you. So I'm gonna add this so that if I hit enter, and then now I can also add tags, right? Because that's an option too. Here, I'm not really interested in adding tags, so I'm just going to say no. Then I have one last undocumented column. I'm not going to document it because I don't want to go on too repetitive. And then I also have the option to redocument something that's already been documented. So that's a nice one because you might want to change something or you might want to add a test to something. So I'm going to, I said no, so I guess we're out of this flow, but I'll come back to it. So I didn't document any of the already documented columns. Right now, this is stopped, but you can see here what is really cool is that the unique test failed. So luckily we have a non-unique amount in the data. However, the not null test passed. And what this means for our documentation is that the unique test was not added to the schema YAML, but the not null was. And if I refresh this, you can see, and I'm sorry for the ordering, which is actually broken. So in theory, so this is the fact orders model. So we flipped it, like, I don't know exactly why, but we fixed it yesterday, but I don't know what's happened. But you can see here that the test that wasn't here on the amount column is now added and not the one that failed. So it means that as you document, if something fails, you're not going to add it by mistake. And then whenever you merge, you're going to have surprises that your test is broken. That was essentially that's actually the walkthrough pretty much. So I wanted to bring back the audit because it's nice. So we had 55%.
Bastien, can I add a little thing? Can
Sure.
you talk about how it takes the definition from other models?
That's a great idea. Some of these, so you can see, for example, the order ID column, we didn't document it, and I had removed it from the schema YAML before, but because order ID is present in another dbt model, which I'm not showing here, it's basically taken the order ID definition that's present in the probably STG orders, and it put it in for us so that we can maintain this consistency. That's like the main reason why we built this, because we wanted to say one column should have the same name across the dbt project probably, and maybe across multiple projects if we want that. And so that's done for you. Does that answer does that answer correctly your question, Virginia?
Thank you. Thank you,
All
Bastien.
right. So I'm just gonna, like, for vanity, just put back the audit, and in theory, our test coverage has gone up. We've gone from 55% to 61% documentation coverage, and the test probably has increased a little bit, but not by much, 27 and now 31. That's essentially what the tool does. Now I can go through any of these other things in a little bit, but if you want, we can talk a little bit about what we have, what we're thinking of for later, and then maybe we can take some questions. So we are now doing essentially this little audit task, which could be made a lot better and a lot more granular. And we are doing the documentation and unification of columns. So we're thinking of a lot of things that we want to do, but what's for sure planned in the next feature release, we have probably a lot of bugs to fix for now, but that's what's coming up. So we want to be able to support essentially having more than one DBT project under scope. For example, at TripActions, we maintain several DBT projects, one, for example, for our main data warehouse, but one for the data scientists, and it like lives in different schemas on the database. But in theory, they all end up in our database, and they are all queryable. So if something we wanted order ID to mean the same thing everywhere. And if it doesn't, then probably we need to rename our comments, like the assumption. So if we want to do this in the current version of the tool, we don't have the possibility to have more than one project in the scope for some technical reasons, but that's coming. What else we want to do? We also want to add all the tests. So even the complex ones with arguments. So today, what I showed you is unique and not null, because these are easy to write the SQL for, but we will basically call the internals of dbt to run your tests rather than implementing it ourselves. And with this, you'll be able to and refer to any of the tests that your dbt project manages, which is really cool. And another thing that we're thinking about, actually, it's all Virginia's great idea, is how can we get a little bit smarter about adding some of the tests. So there is a thing that some people use, which is the little config block at the top of their models, and you have a field that's called primary key. We're thinking, okay, if somebody says primary key is this column, say primary key is order ID, then maybe we could suggest the test for uniqueness and not null automatically. Or having some sort of regex patterns, for example, where if you have something that contains email, then maybe you add a PII tag or something like that. So these kind of like things that could be made a little bit nicer, and you don't have to add them yourself. And in theory, it should be controlled with all sorts of config arguments and things like that. We can check the documentation later. And then in the yet name next feature release, some of the things that we really want to do is that it should be more than just around documentation. So I think there are like already some great stuff that's around, but could we get some stuff from the graph? Are there things that are important to show? Maybe in relation to the audit. What if you could show that this particular model is really hyper connected to other models, and maybe the severity of it not being test covered is really important, and things like that. And also maybe something around change validation, telling you, oh, you've made this change to this table in your dev, and compared to the one in prod, here is what's changed. Or I think I've seen some things around like that, and there are probably some tools already available, but we're thinking of bringing it into that flow also. So this is what's in the future, and I'm sure it'll grow, because if people start using it and thinking about their use cases, there'll be more to do. So there are some caveats that I want to talk about. Can dbt-sugar stop messing with my other model columns definitions? So right now, no. If you change the definition for order ID, it'll change it everywhere in all of your models, because that's the assumption or the opinion we started with. However, it may not work for everybody. So we'll be probably adding something to control that in the config somewhere. Can dbt manage more than one can dbt-sugar manage more than one dbt project at the time? That's not yet, but it really should. And that's probably coming, but not now. So you have to do it on a one project per basis, on a per product basis. And can dbt-sugar add all the tests that I talked about soon? But for now, we're stuck with unique and not null, which is a good start for this alpha thing. Really, I think it's all up to you now to get involved. So there's a lot we can do, but there's also time that's a bit pressing. If you start using the tool, or if you have some feature ideas, all of that stuff, our repository is open on GitHub, and we'll be more than happy to have discussions on there and take any PRs. We also have a Discord server if you want to join and talk about things, but that's optional, right? Hopefully it's fun. Right now it's me, Virginia, and a bot. Oh, and I think Noel joined also at some point. And you can install it from pip, or you can do it. There's documentation on how is best to install it, but it's available on PyPI. So all of these are handy links if you want to check out the repository. You can go to our GitHub. There is really nice, pretty documentation. Then Gitbook was really nice to offer a sort of fully fledged license, because it's an open source project. And if you want to get in touch with us, here are the socials. Yes, one thing I forgot to say is currently the support is for Snowflake and Postgres, because that's what we have at our disposal to connect to. There are a few little database calls, but it's very easy to extend. And if we leverage more and more of the dbt API as it gets more and more stable, we might just be able to just leverage whatever is already in the dbt project. So that's it. We'll take questions. Anything else?
I want to say something. The idea of making the primary key, I don't want to take ideas. It was for Martin that he had great ideas.
Sorry.
No,
Sorry, Martin, if he's in the call.
And also, this idea came from TripActions. We have such an amazing team. Like, I have been there already 1.5 years, and it's great. And we are hiring. So if you guys are interested, really, it's really fun job. We are such an amazing team. You can see Bastien. So feel free to go to the web of TripActions and check out the application that they are open.
What roles are we looking for?
A lot.
Very cool. Thank you both, Bastien and Virginia. I think we take it over to some questions now that we've had come in the chat. Let's see, got a handful here. I'm gonna, not because it's the question I asked, but I just think it would be a good kickoff for the rest of the questions. You've shown us some very cool features today. I want to know, what's the most compelling reason for other teams to pick this up? What do you think is the biggest thing that everyone would hit?
That's a good one. I think the most thing that we leveraged from having a tool like this was the definition consistency. That was that's actually the main reason why. So the problem is that you build your models and then you have this same column in different places, and then you write the documentation over and over. And every time maybe you change it, and maybe you don't remember exactly what you wrote or this kind of thing. And so then you have concept drifts, and you're like, this order ID in this table means that, and then it means a little bit of a different thing here, and all of that stuff. So I think improving the consistency is probably one of the main reasons, because otherwise you'd have to go through the schema YAMLs yourself and do this QA, I think. And I think having something that you're going to add testing as you're almost developing your stuff, it always puts documentation at the forefront at the end of your PR, and then you don't forget to document stuff. And then all of a sudden, when you apply this tool, you don't have over 70% of your models that kind of fail, and you're like, oh damn.
Yeah, kind of like you have to go out of your way to not document.
Yeah, right? In theory. You can always do it.
Totally. Okay, we've got another one. When adding documentation, does the tool allow for Ginger references to do markdown, much similar to how dbt does?
I'm not sure, actually. Virginia, you wrote a lot of that doc task.
I never have tried it. That question have asked me hey, we have never discussed about it. It's really hard making a tool that have all the use cases. So it's great having this different point of view. So do you support this? And you have think of that. So we would love if you guys can go to the repository and make issues or say, I really want to support this. So we really can check, because it's really difficult making a tool and having all the spectrum.
That was Pablo. Pablo, I apologize. Take the stage here. You asked the question. What are you trying to do?
Thanks for the question. Thanks for the product and everything. It's really interesting, really sweet.
Thank you. I'm sure it probably can accept any old text, because at the end of the day, it's a string that gets passed. But whether it can go and find the docs that are referred to, I don't know. But we'll try it. That's a good one for sure. Yeah.
Claire, do you want to ask yours on Python?
For sure. So I know you said you're very open to PRs and contributions, and it sounds like issue reports too. And I was wondering whether any of you had to learn Python as part of this process, or maybe in the last few years. I know that myself, I didn't come from a software engineering background. And so the idea a few years ago for me to contribute to an open source tool was heck no, I couldn't do that. I don't have that in my skill set. Is that a journey that you went on? And if so, do you have any advice for people who the idea of contributing to this is interesting, but they're not at that level just yet?
I think that's a good one. I think A lot of times we were a bit like our own sort of enemies of, oh, I probably won't understand this fully fledged thing. And it's not, it's so alpha, it's so like everything is. And so I think we need to do potentially a better job at labeling some of the issues that could be picked up by somebody who doesn't know much Python, like some of the stuff, maybe changing a few things, but where the context of the code is very clear and all of that stuff. And generally, that's actually how I do most of my open source contribution still today. I go through like the good first issue or stuff. And then generally the issue is well written and you can start a conversation with maintainers. I think doing some of the PRs against the dbt core product was like really enlightening part, because there you have a lot of people who are ready to tell you how they think you might go about it. And actually that's, for me, that's actually helped a lot. All of a sudden, I'm going to go into this project and try to look at the code, and sure, at some point you have to read a lot of code. But if you ask questions, in general, people are quite nice. For most open source projects, there are some projects that are maintained by not so pleasant people. In that case, you don't want to contribute for that. But so that's how I would do it, I think. Or if you're just trying to learn Python, then think of something you want to build for yourself. And that's the best way to actually go around it, because otherwise just following like books and tutorials of this is a string, this is a this, it's not great. But I don't know, Virginia, you've been Pythonking for a longer time than me. Maybe you have other advice.
I don't know. This is my first project, like doing outside work. I have all my life, I only have make things for work. And I really think that if you really like the idea and you are willing to, and you find nice people to work with, people that they really want you to contribute, I think that is really nice, really nice. And I don't think that, well, Bastien and we are a little bit picky with the things, but Bastien mostly, that is the name of the repository, a bit picky. But we are open to help and support. And I think that if everybody do that, it's so much nicer to be a programmer and to collaborate and everything.
I remember, I think one of the first PRs I did probably for dbt was like, I ended up entirely rewriting everything that I had originally proposed, but it was done on like the guidance of somebody who reviewed the PR and was like, oh, actually, maybe you could do this that way and it'll fit better like this or whatever. And then all of a sudden you really learn, you don't feel like, oh shit, I'm embarrassed at all or anything like that. And that's how I approach reviewing code. And that's how Virginia approaches doing that. And I'm sure a lot of other people in other projects would do that. I'm not just saying about us, but that's a guarantee from us for sure.
That's awesome. That was great. I feel ready to go contribute to a project now after that conversation.
Yeah.
I'm still where Claire was probably whenever your pre-days were. I haven't contributed to anything but watching them and paying attention to them. All right, I've got another, I'm going to ask it because of course, like this is just what happens. I ask a lot of questions. So anyone else is still welcome to ask a question, but I had one. I was wondering how you're calculating test coverage, like how many tests are expected for each model. Your documentation piece made sense. It seemed like every column, but I wasn't sure about tests.
Virginia, you should answer it.
So right now we are doing a really simple test calculation, but we are planning to make everything really like setting up what is the level that you want and everything. Right now the test calculation is how many columns do you have calculated and how many columns you don't have, and we do the average, and the same with the documented. For a column, it's not documented if the description is no description for this column yet. We pick that as a not documented column. So all the columns that have no description yet for this column, they will mark as that is not a good description, is not documented properly.
Got it. And even for tests, it's looking for each column to be tested.
Exactly. So what we are trying to push, even if it's only a column, you can see that the average of the testing, it rise up, and it gives you like the thing of, I am doing a nice job. I am contributing to make the model and the project be more, that I can trust it more.
Healthy, reliable.
So, but we are planning on having configuration of, okay, I want that my models have 20% of testing or 30%, and that is 100%. And so you can see the full picture of you want. We want to really make the two practical for every kind of business.
I was thinking about this earlier because I was like, you can easily get to 100% coverage if you just make sure that things are not null, and then that doesn't necessarily mean your tests are super meaningful. But if we could have a way to say that you should have a variety of tests, so like some sort of like way to define what is good testing coverage, which I think is actually not a trivial question, right? It might, I'm sure there are probably like issues somewhere on the dbt repo, or I think I heard some conversations in one of the dbt office hours where people are like, what do you define as good coverage for tests? Because so I think that's something to define, but in theory we should make it configurable maybe, because I think it ultimately that you might have different requirements depending on what table it is, or all of that stuff. It's a good question. Exactly.
Anyways,
but basically like 100% test coverage now with the stuff that the tool can do, it doesn't guarantee that your data is top notch, but at least it's a little bit better.
Yes, cool. All right, the last question I think we have, which is a bigger one, it's less about the code so much, was more about DBT, since you happen to mention, it sounds like you've got multiple projects at TripActions. So I was curious of what's your rationale for maintaining multiple projects, like from your perspective, why do you do that?
Not really. I think actually Jeff is on the call. Maybe he can even answer that question if you have a better. The only thing I can say is probably sometimes it makes sense to have different spaces depending on like maybe the discipline or the entities that you touch. We did that, and then, but maybe Jeff, do you have a better, because I think analysts are like, you have a lot more of a clear reason for how you divide the DBT projects. Maybe you should chime in.
So the reason why we do it at TripActions is because we want to distinguish between, let's say, the core work of modeling, living in the data warehouse, which works as a foundation for everything else, and then what is done which is facing the end user, whether it is through a data science model or through BI tools. We don't want everyone to model with like core foundations. We only want like experienced data engineer to do that. And having separated projects helps doing this. So that's one reason. So for example, in addition to this, we also have some permissions in GitHub to allow for only certain persons can approve PRs in a specific DBT project. So having those two definitely helps. And we can also allocate different computing resources, though I'm not sure, like you could probably do it also with one single DBT project. I'm actually not sure why we do it, but in addition to what I mentioned at first.
It sounds like you're separating like the disciplines of who's modeling the data.
Exactly.
A little bit.
And then we use, so obviously, like then we have to use, when you look at marks, so at the later stage, then you call your sources become like what you modeled in the data warehouse.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So then eventually you can add test on those sources as well. If you want, like we have I'm just thinking we also have dedicated projects for everything related to events, because it's quite consuming in terms of resources and it's very specific business wise. So we give them like their own place. I think the main reason is really like the permissions and the computing power.
Yeah, I think that's what I would see. Rob isn't in the call. He probably has the master reason about it, but I think that makes sense to a lot of times you can see like I'm touching like some core functionality and I should be maybe more careful, or I should have some assumptions that I can maybe break in other projects. The only perhaps downside of this is that it becomes a little bit tricky to have complete end-to-end lineage, because you can't generate a documentation across DBT projects like to have the flow. So that's a trade-off that we've willingly taken at the point that we made this decision, because that separation was better for us at the time.
Is that something you're going to be examining though with dbt-sugar? You're thinking about it? It sounded like you wanted to support multiple projects. Like just test, why are we in multiple projects?
So like actually, yeah, so because the tool that we have, like the tool that kind of inspired dbt-sugar was like by default already does like across projects, because however, although you might have projects for the data scientists or projects for the core data warehouse, that concept of a column means one thing and it means the same thing everywhere is something that at least at TripActions in our team, that's like our value number one in terms of not the cultural value, but data value. And you can only do it if you look across the different projects. And so we wanted to have that in dbt-sugar also, because maybe other people think they agree. But
I think that one's Claire. I don't want to put you on the spot, but how often do you see, just as we're wrapping up, I'm just curious your take on multiple projects versus.
I'm curious also, actually, what do the DBT people say?
I'm no longer the expert on this, is what I'll say. I actually don't have an informed opinion on this because I don't work on big teams on big data teams anymore. I work with lots of smaller data teams, and the answer there is very different to much bigger teams. So I think all the things that you've talked about, like how is your team structured? What are the contracts between the different projects? How do you understand like end-to-end lineage? Are all the sort of right things to think about when making that decision.